If you have ever heard that eating more protein will magically hack your metabolism or melt belly fat and wondered, is this true? This episode is for you. Like most viral fitness claims, this one is built on a half truth that has been stretched way past what the science actually says. There is a social media ad that lives rent free in my brain from sometime in the 2010s. You might have seen it if you were on Instagram or YouTube at the time because the company spent a ton of money on marketing, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one hit with their ads. The ad featured a super fit man telling people that everything they had been taught about healthy and unhealthy food was wrong, and that there was a science-based way to hack their metabolism. The ad invited people to take a free body type quiz to get the magic formula for their dream body. Obviously, this free quiz wasn't actually free. It would cost you your contact information, which led to an aggressive marketing campaign to get you to purchase an exercise and meal plan along with some very expensive supplements. This ad promised that body composition changes were easy, and that with just a few simple changes conveniently provided by their program, your dream body was within reach. Recently, when I was completing some nutrition continuing education, I was reviewing the thermic effect of food, which is simply how much energy your body uses for digestion. And even though it has been years since I saw that ad, it immediately came to mind. I realize now that the ad was in fact referencing the thermic effect of food, but as I'll explain in this episode, misrepresenting how the body burns stored fat while dramatically over-representing the thermic effect of food's impact on body composition. Today, we are going to take apart this myth, acknowledge protein's impact on satiety, which is also relevant when thinking about energy balance, talk about the very unsexy thermic effect of food, and finally outline what actually matters if you have body recomposition goals. This is the StrongHer Collective podcast, and I'm your host, Morgan Auberg. In this podcast, we talk about all things women's fitness, from training specifics to myth busting and everything in between. In this space, we are challenging the cultural narratives that have, for many years, told women to be smaller instead of stronger. This is a place where I cheer you on and lift you up as you cultivate your strength inside and out. If you are listening on Apple or Spotify, do not forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell notification button so that you never miss an episode. Let's get stronger together. Before we kick things off, this is part 3 of a 3-part series all about protein. To get the protein basics, what it is, how it functions in your body, and general guidelines for how much to eat, go back and listen to part 1. To learn how protein intake impacts muscle during weight loss, check out part 2. Both are linked in the show notes. Let's get into it. The importance of protein for our bodies cannot be understated. Listen back to the first episode in this 3-part series on protein to hear how we use protein not only to build and maintain muscle, but also to make enzymes, hormones, neurotransmitters, and more to help our body function optimally. While protein is an important part of our diet, it does not directly burn fat or magically change your metabolism. This is where protein myths can spread like wildfire because the best myths usually have a kernel of truth. Protein intakes can influence how hungry you feel, how much energy your body uses during digestion, and how well you preserve or build muscle. And all of those factors can indirectly influence body composition, but usually in ways that are much smaller and therefore take much longer or have a smaller impact than fitfluencer grifters would have you believe. So let's start with the first piece of the puzzle: how protein impacts how hungry you feel. Satiety is a fancy word for your feelings of fullness and satisfaction after you've eaten. In the 1980s, researchers Blundell, Rogers, and Hill created the satiety cascade model that helps to explain how satiety is far more complicated than calories in versus calories out. If feeling full and satisfied really was as simple as calories in, calories out, we would only ever feel like eating exactly enough to account for the energy we were using. And once we reached adulthood, we would never gain or lose weight on accident. When reading about the satiety cascade model to research for this episode, I was struck by how complex satiety actually is. For example, things that can impact your sense of fullness and satisfaction can include the size of packaging that a food item comes in. So, how large or how heavy the package is can influence how full someone feels after eating the food inside. Food labeling, including specific things like calorie count, but also including suggestions about how healthy or indulgent a food item is. The smell of food before you eat it. So there's kind of a psychological anticipation, and that anticipation can impact how you feel when you eat the food. The physical size of food can impact your satiety. For example, something larger that takes up most of your plate with fewer calories might make you feel more full than something smaller yet denser with more calories. Another thing that can impact satiety is whether food is solid or liquid form. So a smoothie or a milkshake versus a steak or salad. Usually if it's in liquid form, we don't feel as satisfied. Hormonal responses to food can impact how full you feel. We all have the hormone ghrelin that influences feelings of hunger, and the hormone leptin that influences feelings of fullness. But there are person-to-person variations in how we produce and respond to those hormones. Differences or variations in how individuals respond to psychological aspects of food. For example, certain foods can provide comfort to individuals, and consuming them might have nothing to do with their hunger or satiety. In my experience, if I'm really stressed out, I have no hunger cues. And it's really easy for me to skip meals if I'm stressed. Some people have the opposite experience. When they're really stressed, they have a lot of cravings. We're all so different. The macronutrient composition of a food item can absolutely influence our satiety. So in other words, the distribution of protein, fat, and carbohydrates can impact how full we feel. To stay within the scope of this podcast episode and avoid going off on a 3-hour tangent on all things satiety, let's focus on how the macronutrient composition of a food can influence satiety. Research going back to the late 90s put protein at the top of the satiety hierarchy, with carbohydrates next and then fat below. Quite a lot of research has been published on this topic, so I'll outline one study as an example to give you a picture of how scientists have gone about researching this topic. In an article published by the British Journal of Nutrition in 2010, researchers designed a clever study where normal weight men and women consumed a drink with varying amounts of protein in it, waited for 90 minutes, and then were offered a meal where they could eat as much or as little food as they wanted. Participants in the treatment group consumed one of 3 different protein drinks that were matched for calories, but had different amounts of protein in them. Drink A got 12.5% of its calories from protein. Drink B got 25% of its calories from protein. And drink C got 50% of its calories from protein. Participants assigned to the control group consumed flavored water with no calories ahead of their meal 90 minutes later. Participants in the control group that hadn't consumed any calories through a beverage ahead of time consumed more calories in the meal than those in any of the treatment groups. This was expected because they hadn't had any calories ahead of the meal. Participants who consumed drink A with the least amount of protein consumed more calories in the test meal than those who consumed drink B and group C with more protein. The pattern repeated for the participants in drink B compared with drink C. The study suggests that consuming more protein without consuming more calories impacts how much food you want to eat 90 minutes later. In other words, protein made these participants feel more satiated. There are many studies that have looked at protein and satiety in different ways, and in general, protein as the most satiating macronutrient holds up under scientific scrutiny. But don't forget that satiety is so complicated on an individual level, so your personal experience is not going to be a cookie cutter replication of the generalized findings from research studies. I always talk about research as incremental. It's like a pointillism painting. You go up close and all you see is little dots. Each research study is just one little dot. It's when you back away that the picture begins to take shape. A few years ago, I started to focus on protein-forward options with my snacks and my meals, and I have definitely noticed an increase in satiety for myself personally when I ensure that I've eaten 20 to 30 grams of protein at breakfast and another 20 grams roughly of protein as a mid-morning snack. I find that my energy and focus are more stable, and I can keep going for longer. That being said, there is a place for all macro and micronutrients in a balanced, healthy diet. Protein is helpful and amazing, but your body doesn't function optimally on protein alone. This is where you'll find I would make a really bad influencer. The influencers who blow up on social media tell you, if you want to fix your cravings, stop doing this one thing, or this is the macronutrient that will hack your metabolism. These aren't providing the nuance or balance that real life and real health requires. That being said, if you have strong cravings, difficulty focusing, or low energy, prioritizing protein might help. So will seeing a registered dietitian to provide you professional guidance. And this brings us to the next way that protein can impact your calorie consumption, essentially. Have you ever heard someone on the internet say that protein can burn fat? If you haven't, let me just say that I'm very happy for you, and I hope you stay in your beautiful corner of the internet. But if you have run into the V-Shred guy on YouTube or social media or other fitness grifters, chances are you've heard all sorts of outlandish claims about eating to optimize your metabolism and other nonsense, including that eating protein will burn fat. Eating protein does not burn fat. When grifters use this particular claim, it is in relation to the thermic effect of food, which is a fancy term to describe the amount of energy your body uses simply to digest food. When you eat fat, your body only needs between 0 and 3% of the amount of calories consumed in order to digest fat. With carbohydrate, that number is slightly higher at 5 to 10% of calories consumed. Protein takes the most energy to digest, with about 20 to 30% of the amount of calories in the protein sources needed for digestion. Influencers can hype this up so much that people might start to think that if they eat enough protein, their digestion works so hard that they can take 30% off of their daily calorie count and easily lose weight. That's not realistic. Let's talk about what really happens. In almost all cases, protein is eaten with other macronutrients. If you eat pure protein all day long, you won't have any carbohydrates, including fiber. You won't have any fat or a variety of micronutrients, which are all needed for optimal health. The most realistic way to think about the thermic effect of feeding is that on average, about 10% of daily energy intake is needed for digestion as a whole when you are eating a healthy, varied diet. Let's put this into perspective. Say someone eats about 2,000 calories per day and gets around 10% of those calories from protein, or roughly 50 grams a day. If they increase that amount of protein to 25%, or about 125 grams on a daily basis, while keeping total calories the same, their energy expenditure from digestion might increase to about 60 to 80 calories per day. Over time, that adds up, but it adds up very slowly. At that rate, it would take roughly 6 to 8 weeks to lose a single pound, assuming nothing else changes, and making the huge assumption that they are able to perfectly adhere to their diet. Have you ever been on a diet and perfectly adhered to calorie count and macronutrient distribution for 6 weeks or longer? I don't think I've perfectly adhered for even a day. So, yes, protein can make small differences in energy expenditure, but it's the least important reason to prioritize protein. The real benefits come from muscle repair and satiety, not because protein is secretly melting away fat. And there you have it. If you learned something new in this episode or have any questions about protein or training, I'd love to hear from you. I'm on Instagram at strongher.collective. That's StrongHer.collective. You can support the show by writing a review on your favorite podcast platform and sharing it with a friend. Until next time, let's get stronger together.